Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. It's our absolute pleasure to have Amjad Masad with us on Let's Talk Product. So to start off, let me quickly introduce you to who we are and what we do. So Let's Talk Product is an initiative organized by Propeller, which is an early stage venture capital firm based in Jordan that invests in and supports great founders building global products. Let's Talk Product is an initiative that came out of Propeller for us to connect with the builder community and create a knowledge sharing platform primarily centered around product discussions. Our guest for today is our great friend Amjad Masad, the co-founder and CEO of Replit, an online coding platform that lowers the barriers of entry for building and shipping software. Amjad is an incredible software engineer that has dedicated his career to making programming more accessible. His journey in building Replit actually started here in Amman, back when he was a computer science student at Princess Sumaya University for Technology, PSUT. So what started off as a passion project for Amjad to solve a pain point, a personal problem he and his peers were facing, has now grown to become a leading global product backed by top-tier VCs, including YCombinator and Andreessen Horowitz. Amjad, your journey, passion, and persistence inspires all those around you, and we're absolutely honored to have you with us today to share your story. Joining me as well is my colleague, Tambi Jalouqa, CEO of Propeller. So welcome, Tambi and Amjad.
Hi, Amjad. Super excited to be here and a big fan and already looking forward to hear all about your journey.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I'm very excited to be here as well. And, we got to meet a few times. I've heard about Propeller, and I think what you guys are doing is really awesome. And I'm excited to share my story with the community and get to know you more.
Thanks. Thank you, Amjad, sorry. So I'd like to just go back to the early days of building Replit. What did you set out to solve at that point, and how did you go about it?
Yeah, so this goes back to maybe 2009, and I was going to university at the Princess Sumaya University for Technology, PSUT, and one of the issues I had at the time, I didn't have a laptop. Actually, few people had laptops. They were very expensive. So you had a desktop at home, and you go to the uni, and there you you go down to the computer lab, and for every language and for every computer class, programming class, you have to set up the development environment. You have to download an IDE, especially if it's Java. Usually it's a very heavy IDE, multiple gigabytes, or we pass a USB around. Or maybe hopefully the computer has the IDE. Then you have to set it up, and you write your program. But say you want to share your program with another student, or you want to collaborate with another student, or share your program with the teacher. It was always there's always this problem of versions not matching, or things going wrong in different ways. They have a missing library, something is going wrong. So it was never a smooth process. So that's one of the problems that I had. Another problem is that I really wanted to write code on my phone. I was using my phone at the time. I had the Nokia N60 or something like that, which is this big one with a full keyboard. And I used to take notes on it. I think how people use smartphones today, I was very heavy smartphone user at the time. And I started thinking about, can I build applications for this thing? One of the things that got me excited as at the time was really getting obsessed with JavaScript, because I just saw a lot of what's happening on the web as really interesting. So Chrome had just come out, Gmail had just come out, and this idea of JavaScript becoming a language where you can write applications, and this idea of web applications was really interesting to me, because now you don't have to download an application, you don't have to install it. You can just go on the web and you can have your entire application suite. You can do your work, you can do everything there. So I was also excited about the potential of potentially coding on my phone. And I built, the first thing that I built was like a very small web page that I could run on my phone, where it has an input box that I can type some JavaScript in there, and then there's a run button where I can run it, and then it will show alerts and it will show the result. So that was a very simple thing that I built, but in class under the desk, I was like using it to learn more JavaScript and programming. And as I use it more, I thought, okay, this is actually really useful, and maybe other people would use it. So I started thinking about, okay, what does it mean now to actually build a full application to make it easy for people to code and on the web, and solving the problem of setting up the development environment and all of that. So 2010, 2011, we're prototyping a lot. At the time, my friend also from PSUT joined me, Max Shawabka, and we were trying different approaches. I pitched him on this idea and he found it very interesting, very exciting, at least technically. He's a very technical guy. And we did a bunch of prototypes and we're able to create a very simple online REPL. And this idea of a REPL is a very simple online environment, much simpler than an IDE. Mm-hmm. And we built a very simple one and we shared it with our friend group. So it had a few languages. It had JavaScript, it had Lisp, it had some variant of Python or Ruby. It was very simple, but it was amazing response. People from our university, people around us just loved it a lot. So we thought, okay, we're gonna make this into an actual thing that you can use, that you can run any language on. But that turned out to be really hard and took us almost a year to do it. And we had a big breakthrough sometime in 2011. I had graduated, I was working at Yahoo, but I was still obsessed with the problem. So we still worked on the problem. And we had a big breakthrough then when we were the first, and this is interesting, where like a couple of students from Jordan were the first to do something, that important, which is we were the first project to compile the C and C++ implementation of languages like Python and Ruby to JavaScript. And then we put it online, we open sourced it, we released the application, and it just exploded. There was two types of interest in it. One is purely academic. Apparently we did something that people found to be a breakthrough in the technology at the time. And two, people who saw it as a potential for a product that could be really compelling, an online IDE product. And actually maybe three, there's another third interest, which is entrepreneurs that wanted to build online coding experiences that didn't have the technology at the time. 2011, if you remember, there was this big excitement and interest around MOOCs. So massively online, open online courses. And so now you have edX and all these things, but at the time it was Udacity, Coursera, and Code Academy. So Code Academy was the company that was trying to build like the very first interactive in-browser coding platform, learning platform. Was focused on learning. And so they started using the technology behind Replit that we built, Max and I. And we can get into that if you'd like, but I tried to start a company in Jordan, but it was really hard to do that. So I ended up joining Code Academy as their founding engineer. And maybe I'll stop here. I'll let you ask questions.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, how did the co-founders of Code Academy discover Replit?
Yeah, so it was Hacker News, which maybe for your audience probably knows it. And Hacker News, it's such a simple website built by Paul Graham, who's actually now an investor in Replit, but it was a great website to discover new technology. Still is. It's very simple. It's a list of links and comments. And the audience there is very special in that they're highly technical, but they're also kind of similar to your audience, I would guess, but also founders and entrepreneurs and builders. And so everyone basically in Silicon Valley reads Hacker News. And so we were at the top of Hacker News for 2 days straight. So basically most people that read Hacker News kind of learned about us through there.
And then what happened? So they approached you, asking you to join, and you had a tough decision to make, I guess, right? So you either start this company or leave Jordan and join the team in New York.
Yeah, it was pretty tough because the idea I had, which still have, and which Replit is based on today, took us years to actually get the resources to get it done. But the idea I had was a little bit different than the idea they had. So they wanted to build a education platform. What I wanted to make is a very simple IDE, is a very simple online REPL to get people started with programming, to do prototyping, to do collaboration, and just make it a platform, make it a place where people can build things easily. And as part of that, also make it easy to learn programming. That was only part of the piece of the puzzle. And so we, at the time, our designer, Haya, who's my wife and co-founder right now, at the time, we just knew each other from work, and I asked her to help us with design, because, you know, two engineers designing a product is not a good idea. You end up with very bad visual design, you end up with bad UX. And so she helped us with the UX and UI. She also designed the logo that we still use today back in 2011. And Max wanted to go back to Google. So Max had interned at Google. He really liked it. He really liked the culture there. And so he wanted to go back, despite me kind of selling him on the dream. And he always thought that I was thinking too big. Because I think a lot of engineers, he's very technical and just focus on the immediate problem, not necessarily the bigger vision and problem. But I always wanted to make something bigger. So he went back to Google, and when Haya and I went out and tried to raise money, try to figure out ways to get the business off the ground, get expertise, get mentors, you know, things like that. It was hard to do in Jordan. Like we pitched a few venture capitalists at the time. It was very, very different landscape than it is today. There were no Propeller. There was no funds. There was no, well, at least I didn't find them if there were. And when Codecademy reached out, I saw it as an opportunity to, you know, although they didn't have the exact vision, I saw it as an opportunity to join something at such an early stage and be part of the journey and potentially maybe build the thing that I wanted to build there. I was still reluctant to join them. I was very set on kind of working on what I had. And so I contracted with them a little bit, and then they really decided they wanted me to join them. So the CEO of Codecademy flew to Jordan, and he kept wanting to talk business, but, you know, as a good Jordanian, you got to take them places. So I took him to the Dead Sea. I took them al-Balad, and we had Argile and Mashawi, and just showed him a good time. And we talked about technology, we talked about startups, we talked about how to, the vision for the platform, what they have, what the vision that I had. And he kept making me offers. He kept making me salary and equity offers. And every one of them I thought was too low, because the technology that I built was powering the website. And as a founding engineer, I thought I should be getting more. And on the way out to the airport, I was driving into the airport. I already said no, like, 10 times to his offers. At the end, he made me a compelling offer, and he pulled out the contract and he scratched the numbers, and he put the numbers we agreed on in the car. And just before he exited the car to the airport to fly, we signed the papers. So then I decided, okay, this is a good opportunity for me. And they gave me the offer. We started the visa process, and in 2012, I joined Codecademy as a founding engineer.
Okay, amazing. And Tanvi, sorry, do you have something to?
No, I was just wondering, so did you feel that Code Academy, being Code Academy, it will not really deter you from your vision because they already have a Repl built in and it's part of the process. And if it was a different company, would you have taken the job if it was an Airbnb? And I feel like you wouldn't have. So,
yeah, probably not. The reason I took the job is because I thought that we could build what originally I set out to build. And we did some of that, and I'm not, I don't, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. It got me to the US. It got me the connections. It got me the experience. I've learned a lot from Code Academy, a lot of what to do, but also a lot of what not to do. A lot of how you can screw up as a first time founder. I learned a lot about building company culture. And so it was very much a learning experience. I wouldn't say that we agreed on the vision. And I think where they are today and where they're headed is a profitable business, is a very respected business. They educated millions of people on coding, and as part of Code Academy, we had a great impact on the world, and now they're on to build a very successful business. But ultimately, yes, it wasn't exactly the same vision.
Yeah. So Amjad, if I'm not mistaken, you were there for around 2 years, and from there you joined Facebook, right? Where you were working on React Native. So what triggered you to move back and start working Repl.it, and when was that?
Yeah, so with the move to Facebook, I actually wanted to learn how to do mobile development. And when I joined Facebook, I started working on their Android apps and Android platform that they were building, because I thought Android, and I still think Android is one of the, it's probably the biggest computing platform today, since so many people only have an Android device in the world, and so many people are coming online using an Android tablet. And I thought this is my joining Facebook had nothing to do with the social network. It was mostly the internet.org they were doing, and it was mostly how much they were investing in Android. I was really interested in that. And so when I joined, I thought that mobile development frameworks and applications was not in a great shape. It was, you change a bit of Java code and you wait 15 minutes to see the update on the app. And I'm used to the REPL style, rapid mobile development. And so that wasn't really happening there. So we started working on React Native, which brings web technologies to native applications. Now, we finished React Native released the beta version, not finished, it's still being worked on, but released the beta version in 2015. And then I constructed a team, we called it the JavaScript infrastructure team at Facebook, around can we create this suite of tools that makes JavaScript development better. So I'm sure a lot of people watching know them right now, which is Babel compiler, which makes it easy to write JavaScript applications, Jest, which is a testing framework, and later on, after I left the team, continued working on Yarn and things like that. So I started that team, but then lost a little bit of motivation at the time because we had released React Native. It didn't seem like my managers and the company really saw a lot of the value in the work that we're doing. And so there was a lot of internal tension there. Facebook there was a lot of shifting. It was growing fast. When I joined Facebook, it was only 5,000 people. Now they're like, 50,000. So they 10x since then. But the company was growing fast. There was a lot of changes, and it wasn't a great environment for me. And so Haya and I, we always work on side projects together. And so we wanted to work on a side project, and we, built some apps and did some prototyping and things like that. And then she actually suggested us, like, whatever happened to Repl.it? We had the domain, we had the a demo page. Basically, it was functioning, but it wasn't really an application. You couldn't log in, you couldn't sign up, you couldn't save your code. And we started working on it again. It had a few thousand users, and we improved it. That's, you know, towards the early months of 2016, and it started exploding in growth again. So went from, say, less than 10,000 users to 70, 80,000 users by April 2016. It was a lot of work just to keep the site up. It was costing me some money to keep it up. And so it was also bringing in some revenue as well. We had a product that we were selling. And at the time, my work at Facebook was kind of concluding. Hai and I looked at the online coding landscape, and we saw a lot of different companies. There was now, you know, 2011, we were the first. Now there was Cloud9, there was Coding, there was Nitros, there was like at least 10 companies doing some kind of online coding. What we didn't find was which by the way, still Replit kind of is, which is a lightweight IDE, a very simple IDE that allows you to learn, makes it easy for you to learn programming, makes it easy to prototype and collaborate on code, and makes it easy to build simple applications and simple scripts and experiment with programming and things like that. And so we set out to build that. So that you had the heavyweight IDEs, and you had the very lightweight environments like CodePen and things like that, where you couldn't do anything interesting. It was only one language, things like that. So Replit really wanted to be in the middle. And you know, by that time, by April 2016, the growth that we had, and because we had some money coming in, we thought, okay, and the strategy that we had, we thought, okay, this is something that could take off. So it was an easy decision to make, to quit and start Replit.
Okay, and if a year, I believe, maybe 2017 or 2018, you got approached by Sam Altman, former president of YCombinator. So he calls you up and invites you to join YC, right? And after that, Andreessen Horowitz also expressed interest and ended up investing in Replit. So what's clear here is that you've built something so valuable that top-tier investors start to notice you and want to be part of your journey. So what attracted them to Replit at that point? So where were you? What have you accomplished up to that point?
Yeah. So 2016 and early 2017, we're like a little bit more focused on bootstrapping the business. We weren't really kind of trying to approach it from a growth kind of venture angle too much. But the product and the platform was growing really fast. And the fact that we were like 3 people into 2017 working on it, because again, we wanted to stay lean. We raised a little bit of money, but we were always like, you know, that's probably like, you know, we're not going to raise any more money anytime soon. We're making revenue. Replit, you know, as a company, always made money from the start. And, but the growth in terms of consumer, prosumer kind of growth was undeniable, and was the kind of growth you wouldn't expect from something as niche as coding. I guess GitHub had a similar growth trajectory before that. So, you know, when you're technically interesting, and when you have that kind of growth, and a lot of stories started coming out of Replit, like, you know, teenagers learning how to code and building applications and building startups and building businesses. So people started noticing. And Paul Graham, who again, the early part of the story, who made YCombinator and Hacker News, one day saw us on Hacker News. So I wrote a technical post about infinite loops. So in that post, I talk about how Replit is the first environment to not put any limits on user programs. So if you build a program in Replit right now, we don't limit you in terms of time of execution. but what ends up happening is that if you run into an infinite loop, you might get your browser stuck, or get kind of eat up a lot more resources on our multi-tenant cloud system. And I wrote a post about how we hack around that. In that post, I list some user applications that they built that this kind of technology enables. And a lot of them were games, and a lot of them were small applications and things like that. And I put it up, and then I think a few days later, a few weeks maybe, Sam Altman reached out, and he texts me on Twitter, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Sam Altman. I run YCombinator." In my mind, I know you, dude. Everyone knows you. And he's like, "Why don't you come down to OpenAI, which is in the mission here in San Francisco, and meet me?" So Sam Altman at the time was president of YCombinator, and also was working at OpenAI. I don't know if he was CEO at the time. He's now the CEO, but he was working at OpenAI. So I go and meet him there. And we chatted a little bit, and he said, Paul Graham, PG, told me to reach out. Mm-hmm. And I was a little bit surprised at the time. And I told him why was Paul interested in us? He's like, he'll email you. So Sam and I had a good conversation, but then Paul followed up with an email. And basically what Paul said is that he sees Repl.it as like he saw the early stages of the PC revolution, which is kind of a very big thing to say, and the early days of the web. He says that he's seeing something here where you have a lot of hobbyists, you have a lot of young people that are exploring the platform and building applications and building games and making connections and shipping stuff that you only see in the early days of something great. And so that's what he said. And he said he actually had the same idea around the time he was selling his company to Yahoo before starting YCombinator. So he had an idea of, having a simple interface to put in code and run the code and run the application and show the results back. But he said he couldn't build it at the time because the technology wasn't there. And we had a lot of back and forth. And, at the time, Hai and I had applied to YC about 4 times, and they ignored us. They never given us even an interview. And we're relatively unknown. We're working, we're making money, we're selling to schools at the time, and they were trying to get us to do YC. It was 2017 at the time, and the winter 2018 batch was about to start. And Hai and I talked about it, and we're like, do we want to give up 7% of the company? We're already kind of profitable. We just need to, do more sales and, build the company up. And so we started talking a lot about it, and we talked to our employees, and which at the time it was only one, actually. We talked to Mason, our employee, and Faris, my brother, was helping us from Jordan. Now he's here. And the conclusion we arrived at is that we have a fork in the road. Either we continue building Repl.it as potentially an education company, and that goes back to the question about Code Academy, because our customers were mostly in education, or we take the VC money and we try to build our dream, which is an environment, very simple, that you can both learn and build in. So you can build stuff, but you can also learn programming. And so that was the fork in the road. We ended up deciding to going with YC. because we know it was going to open the doors for Andreessen Horowitz and other VCs, and it will get us more on the map. It'll give us the connections. It'll give us the tools. It'll give it the advice. But I should say the decision was very hard to make because when you're, you know, as venture capitalists, you know, when you take the more like, you know, VC path, what you're saying is that what you're basically agreeing to is that I'm not going to build a small business. I'm going to build not even a medium business. I'm going to build a very large business. And there's a bit of loss of control there. There's a bit more risk there because if you don't build a large business, you know, you need to have a big return on the money. And so it was a tough decision to make. We ended up making that decision because we really believed in our vision and our mission, and we wanted to take that path. And we did it in a smart way. I can talk a little bit about how we maintain control of the company, and got people on board that understand that we're going to take our time. So, you know, we took money from Andreessen Horowitz, and we're still a small company. We're still 12 people today. So one of the things I learned at Codecademy is hiring too fast destroys the culture, and trying to accelerate things is, as we've seen right now in companies like WeWork and big Silicon Valley failures, and Uber, I don't know if it's going to fail, but it looks like it. It's you know, it's a very risky path, and you're not always building something to last. So anyways, we can dig more into it, but yeah, that was the decision that we had to make.
That actually brings me to the following question, which is something you just briefly touched on. So you've acquired the majority of your users without spending much on growth, right? You didn't do much marketing. So can you tell us a bit more about your product-led growth approach, and why is that important to you?
Yeah, I'm not a marketer. Haya has a little bit more background in product positioning and marketing, but I have a very simple view of the world, which we can talk about the negative side effects of that, but the positive side effects is very simple view of the world, that you build something that solves a problem and people will find that thing to solve their problem, right? I think if you look at the technology landscape, say before 2010, just an arbitrary date, but before 2010, 2009, it was mostly the channels that you would go to find customers and users are the traditional marketing channels, whether it's you know, advertising, whether it's a lot of different traditional marketing channels. In the kind of post Facebook, Twitter, Hacker News, Reddit world, how people discovered products, both customers and engineers, product managers, product designers, discovered products on Twitter, Hacker News, now Product Hunt, all these different platforms for discovering these things. Even, you know, nobody would have thought that a successful enterprise sales strategy would be something that's described now as bottom-up strategy, right? So like Dropbox was a consumer company before it became an enterprise company. Everyone in the world started using Dropbox, and then it made it really easy for them to become an enterprise company. Now Dropbox make, you know, majority of their money, I don't know how much, but I would guess 70, 80%, if not more, from enterprise. And the way they approached it is just building something that people would want to use. And that's the kind of the YC model of things. Now, that is not to say that there's no acceptable, you know, marketing approach and sales approach to getting a product out there. It depends, I think, on the founder's personality. But for me, as someone who reads Hacker News, as someone who is on the various social media channels, I thought that, you know, the way forward is you make something really good that people want to share and people want to talk about. And so if you made something really good, especially if it had sharing functionality like Replit, everything has a URL, every program has a URL, then you're going to spread by just like force of word of mouth, and just people want to talk about it. And so that really makes us focused on really building the best product we can build. I think at some point, and now we're starting to, get our toes a little bit into more intentional growth and growth marketing and things like that. But I still believe that there's a founder strategy fit, right? If you're a founder that's coming from a business-oriented world, from a sales and marketing-oriented world, you probably want to take the sales and marketing first approach. Mm-hmm. If you're a hacker, entrepreneur, builder, you want to take a product first approach. And the way you do that, and that's the YC model as well, is you build something you yourself want to use. Yeah. Because you always have this instant feedback loop of like, you build it, you improve it, you test it out. And at Replit today, our first customer is always us. So we're building a new product now. It's not a secret. It's called Teams, to allow people to collaborate easier on Replit and Repls. Mm-hmm. And we just released an internal version yesterday. Like last night at 10 p.m., I got a message. We have an internal version. Now we're using it, and we have a feedback channel. Half on Slack, half of it is external customer feedback, half of it is internal feedback. So we're giving each other feedback all the time, and that's how you build a product-led organization, I believe.
Amazing, great. So I'm curious to know. So you've set this project aside for about 5 years, right? Where you went to Code Academy and Facebook. Do you have any regrets about taking that time off from solving the problem? Or do you feel that you needed that break in a way to help you grow and served you well?
Yeah, both. Sometimes I feel it's a bit unfair, because if Hai and I are, founders, were born in, say, America, and were educated at MIT or Harvard, we would have had an easier path to get to what took us, 5-6 years to get to, right? It's kind of the core and unfairness of the world is the fact that there are people that happen to be in places where there's more opportunity. Now, I think it's really great that there are companies like yours, and there's more infrastructure now in Jordan to build that. To maybe the next Amjad and Haya would not have to leave Amman to do that, right? And so there's a bit of, not regret, I would say just a feeling of like, we could have made so much more progress if we had the resources to start this company 10 years ago, right? Yeah. Versus 4 years ago. So there's a bit of that, but then the fact that we're able to do it just shows you that, no matter what this unfairness that exists, there's still a lot of opportunity in this world to go after your dreams. And if you work really hard, what is this old saying? Like, you be really good that they can't ignore you, right? So there's that. But to your immediate question about why it took us so long, I think it's partly resources. Partly, when I quit Code Academy, I couldn't have started a company because I was on a visa. I wasn't on a green card. And so it took getting to Facebook to then later get the green card. And then later I could start a company. So a lot of good things had to happen. At the same time, with regards to growth on a personal level, I think that was really important. One of the things that I don't think gets talked about a lot, but founder psychology is very important in a sense that a lot of the challenges in starting a company and running a company is self-inflicted, meaning you are your own enemy in a lot of ways. So if you're a purely rational robot and can wake up every day and make progress and work on what you're working on, it's clear to say, unless you're working on a clear dead end, it's easier to say that you're going to be successful. But most of the time, we lose motivation, we lose our health, we lose someone in our life. We have challenges as human beings that most of the time, this is what stands between you and your dreams. Mm. And learning how to deal with those challenges, I think, is a very important thing for any wannabe founders and wannabe entrepreneur. So I think one of the things that really helped me was, at the time when I was Facebook, I had more time on my hand, and Hai and I spent a lot of time learning about, say, meditation, how to exercise, how to eat healthy, how to work hard without burning out, without getting too tired, building interpersonal skills, social skills, learning how to give speeches, learning how to talk publicly. All these soft skills are incredibly important for starting a company. And so I'm grateful for that time it gave us to get to that point.
Oh, that's amazing. I think what's clear here, it's also your passion for the problem. It's kind of what drove you forward and kept you going on this path, right? So that's clear. You really are a mission-oriented person. You had a vision of how this should be solved, and taking into account all the other competitors that came along, nobody was still doing it the way you envisioned it to look like and function. So how are you able to remain this focused and persistent? Is it just that you had this huge passion for the problem?
Partly that, and just like تناحة الأردنية, I guess. Just being stubborn. I think just being stubborn. I was just scrolling through the Q&A. I know we're going to get to them later, but someone was asking, like, you were talking about, or maybe I blogged about DevTools not being or EdTech not being a VC, not being an industry that historically has returned a lot of money to VC. That's a great question. GitHub kind of changed that, returned billions of dollars to VCs. EdTech is still not a great thing for VCs, but when you have a passion and a vision and a dream, you do things that are kind of irrational. So, a lot of people, like, every step of the way, people had good arguments that I didn't have a good counter argument for why this could not work. So in the early days, some of my colleagues at Yahoo, who were Maktub in Jordan, who were exceptional developers, told me that it's such a stupid thing to compile all this JavaScript and ship megabytes of JavaScript to the browser. We ended up, moving away from that for various technical reasons, but it got us through the door. It was the first thing that we were able to do. And so, that's one thing. Another thing, like, a lot of people told us, you're competing with, you're competing with really big companies, you're competing with Microsoft, or you will not be able to get any growth or users. We ended up doing that. So a lot of times, a lot of it, in some sense, a founder needs to be rational and intelligent and really, think through and plan things. In a lot of ways, you have to be irrational and just passion driven and just a bit emotional. So, like, look at Elon Musk, for example. He says that SpaceX and Tesla, when he started them, he felt like they're not going to survive. He says he put 10% chance that they would survive. And starting a space company is kind of a silly thing to do. But he talks about, the vision that he has, which is the idea of he's driven apparently or allegedly by the survival of humanity and becoming planetary species. So I think the vision and the mission and just the pure interest in the technology and technical parts of the problem really pushes you forward as a founder. So I would say have both, right? So be this irrational, someone who's driving and ignoring a lot of potential intelligent arguments against why you're doing. And then on the other hand, and we can talk more about that, you also got to plan, you got to persuade investors, you got to persuade employees to join you. So you have to have both, which is kind of weird to say because they seem opposite, but you have to have both.
It's a balance, I guess.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, before I move on to Q&A, we've got quite a few questions lined up. Tambi, I want to see if you have any final questions for Amjad.
I do have a question about your vision, by the way. So I love Replit, by the way, and I'm looking forward to the hosting and Teams features. How much would you say that you reached your goal with, like your vision with Replit? Because hosting changes the game, I'm assuming, because you can deliver long-running processes, long-running, apps. I'm not asking for a product roadmap, but how much of your vision, like, would you say you've accomplished so far?
The thing about visions in missions is they keep changing and expanding, and your ambition keeps getting bigger. And meeting people like Paul Graham and other people, mentors, also expand your ambition a little bit and show you what's possible and show you historical examples of things and where they can be headed. I think the thing that remained constant in my vision is a platform that makes it really easy to get started with coding, but powerful enough that you can make stuff in it, and a social network on top of coding. And I think GitHub started this idea, but they haven't really done anything with it in a long time. Like, you can follow people, you have a feed, and that's about it. With multiplayer, we are trying to take it further than what GitHub did. So if you've ever used Replit multiplayer coding with someone else, it's a really, really fun experience. Like, it makes coding different and more fun and interesting. And so that part, I feel like is it's still very early days. I feel like in coding in general, it's very different. Like every sort of skill or every type of job is becoming more collaborative. Most of the white collar jobs, say lawyers, accountants, and all of that, they have more advanced collaborative software in terms of like Google Docs. Everything is also going online. There's QuickBooks online. There's, most jobs are becoming more and more collaborative. The more creative jobs are harder to make collaborative. So look, for example, at design. So you have in design, you have Adobe, which felt like, you're in your own place and you share this megabytes, big files back and forth. There's no way to version, there's no way to collaborate. And you have Figma now, which is overtaking a lot of the market. And what they're doing is making it collaborative, making it real-time collaborative. And they're doing a great job at that. I think that's what we're doing to coding. And this is very, very early stages. I think we're going to have a lot more interesting collaborative tools, and I can talk a little bit about that. On the hosting side, I think that's where something that, my feeling of like how much we can accomplish keeps getting bigger, because the infrastructure that we built is actually very, very powerful at this point. Not only we're able to support millions of users executing code on our platform securely for free, but our infrastructure is already sort of a cloud a full cloud system where you can host things and where you can run things reliably and schedule things. And this is like where this concept of, you know, when you make technical advances and then you look at the thing you built and like, interesting, that could unlock this other thing, that could unlock this other thing. And the more progress we make on the technology, the more things it can, the more ideas it can open up. I can show you a quick demo of also another thing we're playing with. Should we do that?
First time here at Let's Talk Product. Yalla.
Yeah, and don't tell anyone. I know this is broadcasted live, but this is just a technical concept. It's not, we're not, you know, actively going after it, but it's an interesting idea that was unlocked. One of our engineers built it in their free time because we built a lot of the components that would make something like that easier to build. Yeah. So
awesome.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So we call this we call this code canvas, and the idea is that you start with a very simple command line, and you can open a REPL or a project, and you can drag it around. You can look at the files for this project. This is a simple Express server, and it opens the application. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you go back to the command line with something like the Finder or something like that, or something that's also we're working on. You open another project, and that's a Go server. And you can also imagine connecting them together in some way, connecting the output of one to another like a pipe. And this is, you can also open, say, a video. So this is like a video by the NBA. So this idea of like having a canvas to code in, but it also gets into this idea of a desktop and this idea of operating system, basically. Yeah. And you can also potentially make it possible for people to build or open other applications in it. So for example, opening like a Google Doc, and you can imagine this communicating back to the project somehow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You can also introduce different like unit tests, functional tests, some kind of Swagger implementation or open API where you're coding and you're satisfying the contracts in a way.
You could definitely do that. We don't know where it's exactly headed, but this is a weekend project that someone built. And the reason that we're able to build that, because we build all the abstractions necessary to make this possible. So a lot of what ends up happening when you're building a very tech-heavy, technology-based company, you build projects and abstractions and technologies that when you mix them together, they generate new ideas and new concepts. So to go back to your question, I know I take my time, but in some sense, we're you know, the original vision that we had around the platform is still very early because of the collaboration and community aspect is still early. In another sense, we felt like we built a very solid environment already. I'm using it most of the time in my coding. I'm not 100% coding on it, but you know, say 70-80% coding on it. But that sort of vision grew, and the idea of hosting, the idea of you know, having this different way of coding, a code canvas. You can imagine that also in VR, right? You can like put a VR headset and start like coding in VR, say. So there's a lot of ideas that we get there, and you get more and more ambitious. I honestly say we're 1% done, if not even. I think we have a long way to go, and you know, ultimately, we want Replit to stay simple and easy to use, but eventually we're going to have to also build a professional product. that just not hobbyists and consumers and prosumers and programmers would use for prototyping, but also like a professional, full scale IDE. So there's a lot we're going to do and we're planning to do.
Yeah, amazing answer. Honestly, that was what I was looking for. So I think we can move on to the Q&A.
Exactly. We have quite a few questions. I can start off with choosing a few, and then Amjad, if you also want to jump in and answer a couple of questions that caught your attention. So I think this is quite an interesting question. How hard was it to transition from being an engineer to becoming a CEO?
I'm still transitioning. Yeah, it's pretty hard. I think that the biggest, the hardest thing about it is when you're an engineer, when you go, you finish, you go to the office, you do your work, you go back home. When you put your head on the pillow to go to sleep, you're thinking, what did I do today? Right? Most people think that before they go to sleep. And if you feel like you've written a lot of code, you've shipped features, you've opened pull requests, you've closed issues, you've fixed bugs, you feel good, you feel nice, you have a really good night's sleep. If you didn't do a lot and you got stuck debugging something or versioning something or setting up your IDE or something like that, you feel bad and maybe you don't sleep very well. When you go from an engineer to a CEO, that calculus changes. So when you go to sleep at night, you're like, what did I do today? And you try to think about what you did. If you didn't write code, what did you do? And most of the time you can't really come up with a good answer, because what you did is you slacked some people, you had some meetings, you maybe wrote a document, maybe you wrote a few emails, and none of it is this like objective thing that you did. Most of it is enabling other people, recruiting, building the brand, whatever it is you're doing as CEO. And so that's really challenging in terms of feeling good about your work. And that's the most challenging part that I really struggle with till today. But other than that, I've always enjoyed learning new things, and as CEO of a startup, you're always learning new things. So that part is really cool for me. I'm always excited to learn about sales, learn how to run a business, learn about building a company. Right now, we start doing, like, for example, performance reviews and more HR stuff. And to me, that's really interesting and exciting to learn how to build a good culture and all of that. So I don't find that boring, but again, when I go to bed at night, I still always wonder, like, what did I do today? And a lot of times I can't come up with a good answer.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So another question that came in, somebody's curious to learn a bit more about your product discovery approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe, yeah.
Our most important, I'm just going to sit down. Our most important way we discover products is basically seeing what people use with the product, being in the community, and seeing how people are using it, having a lot of channels for feedback, and really embedding yourself in the community, and then using the product yourself. Being very iterative. So when we build something new, most of the time we get a prototype in 2 weeks. We almost never worked on a problem where we couldn't get a prototype in 2 to 3 weeks. No matter how hard, we usually get that. And that gets us, using it very easily and figuring out what's missing, what needs to be done. And then a lot of times we release it to some alpha users, or we get feedback from the community. And then maybe we take our time in making it better before we do the public release.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say just pay attention to how your users using it. If you don't have users, then do whatever possible to get the first users. and sprint really hard to get the first users. If you are not a user yourself, so for example, when we were servicing the edtech community and the teacher community, we still are, it was a bit more challenging because we weren't teachers ourselves. So we surrounded ourselves with our customers. So we recruited one teacher to be our advisor, and we gave him shares in the company. We used to go to his classroom and sit down and watch them use the product. We still do that to some extent. And so if you're not a user yourself of your software, make sure to be there in person. You know, maybe now in COVID, it's hard, you know, at least figure out a way to be there, if not in person, virtually, to be there with your community.
This actually ties in. Go ahead, Tanvi.
Just a follow-up question here, because do you do any, so I'm sure that you have special product metrics that are not the usual, like it's not only about visits and how many times do they open the ID, it's more also how many functions do they write, how many times do they run, how many times do they go to the terminal? Because I noticed like you have features just like the linking or deep linking, things that are unique to the experience of programming on Replit. Do you have some custom events that you track?
Yeah, we basically, as part of our product development processes, we event everything. We put an event on basically every meaningful action you make. You know, we make use of it a lot of times, especially when we're A/B testing, especially when we're evolving the product. And we have dashboards to just measure the health of the community and the product and how people are using it. But we haven't really, it's not our primary way to think about what we should do next. So there is a lot of companies that are very metrics driven, that even like every decision they need to make, it needs to be based on metrics. For us, no, we do take a lot of creative freedom, even if at times it's not supported by metric, and that ends up being paying off. I actually think that you know, a lot of companies start doing metrics too early. I think metrics is important when you get a little bit bigger, but when you're in the early stages of product development, I would say having a conversation with someone, like I said, embedding yourself in the community is much more important than metrics, because metrics won't tell you something when you have 100 users, 1,000 users. You know, they're not as useful. Once you get into the millions and hundreds of thousands, that's when they get useful.
You want the qualitative data at first.
Exactly. You want high bandwidth qualitative data. Just a conversation with someone is much more important.
Amazing. So we've got another question. So Salah is asking, you've mentioned that you are building a product that you want to use, right? Which is kind of contradicts the usual advice of focus on your customers first and you are not your user. So he's asking, how do you do that without falling into the trap that you are your only user? It's a balance. Like you kind of answered this, right? Because it's a balance.
Yeah, it is a balance. I'm just trying to think about like maybe a simple heuristic or rule you can follow. I would say, you know, you always need to test your assumptions. Even when you are the users of the product, you always, you know, you're usually the alpha user of the product and maybe the beta user. But once you put it out in the world, you know, to Tanvi's point, you gotta go build dashboards. You gotta go, you know, if you have a lot of users, you gotta go understand, talk to people. We run a lot of surveys. You have to be in touch with reality and how people use it. You can't be in your own mind, in your own space. You know, it's hard. And, you know, luckily, I think Haya has always been better at talking to users than I am, because, you know, when you're imagining and thinking and building, a lot of times you end up getting stuck. It's a risk. You end up getting stuck. in your own head. So having people around you that are, you know, if you can hire people, maybe hiring a product manager early on would help. Maybe hiring a UX researcher. So there are a lot of different levers you can pull, but make sure there are people on the team that are very focused on talking to users and getting real world data.
Great. We're slightly over time. Do you have some more time for 2 more questions?
Oh yeah, I have time.
You're good. Okay. Are there any specific questions you'd like to answer? Go through that, or shall I continue?
1 second. How cool is Paul Graham? Did you guys ever hang out? Yes, we went to his home, and they invited us to dinner. He's pretty cool. He's a bit different than other people. He you know, he'll be listening to you, but then he will interrupt you and he will say, you know what you have to do? And then he will start preaching ideas, but he's not very tied to his ideas, but he's all about ideas. Like, you know, when you're talking to him, it's like ideas flying around, you know what you should do? Like, and he'll interrupt himself and like give you advice. Yeah, he's, you know, he's very special when it comes to investors and VCs in general, because he can be both specific and general. Most investors are either general or specific. Most of them are actually very general. But you know, finding someone that both can be specific and general is a good idea. Maybe I'll run through them quickly. What advice do you have engineers who are joining a startup? What's a good equity on? I think early stage startups should give a lot of equity to the early stage employees. I think, you know, if you're just starting out and you're a small team, the first hire could be up to 1-2% of the company in options, and they could end up even more at that point. So I think a lot of, I find this in Jordan to be more true, is that people are more you know, more stingy with the equity. I think you should give equity to people so that they are kind of like founders. The first 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even more employees, you should treat them like founders, and you should give them more equity and give them kind of a seat at their at the table. Did you raise money before leaving Facebook? No, I did not. I had some savings. We put in maybe $20,000 into the company before we raised any money. We had some money coming in, so it wasn't hard to do that. So what are your top 5 books? My favorite books have nothing to do with business or technology. Well, maybe the Steve Jobs book I like biographies. Steve Jobs book is very good. Elon Musk book is very good. The biographies are very good. I like more intellectual philosophical books. So Douglas Hofstadter, I Am a Strange Loop, and Gödel Bach is very, very good books. And then I like a lot of history books and things like that. When I sit down to read, I don't want to keep thinking about the thing I think about every day. I want to go out of tech and business to kind of look at other things like that. So I have some on my blog. If you check out my blog, I've written some reviews of books and things like that. Would you sell to GitHub? No, they actually approached us a few times. We said no. Every startup goes through many challenges. What would you tell yourself to focus on 3 years ago? 3 years ago, what I tell myself, like going back, what I tell myself, you know, honestly, have more confidence in the vision and where you're headed, and make more concrete decisions. Don't wishy-wash. Just make a good decision and just drive forward towards that decision, as opposed to jumping back and forth and not really knowing exactly what you want to do. Where do you think you would have been today if you were able to raise capital in Jordan instead of Y Combinator? How important is your presence in the US? I think it's hard to say. I would say we definitely would have made more progress because we would have worked on it harder. I think the biggest open question is like, would you be able to hire talented people in Jordan? I know for a fact that talented people in Jordan exist, but most of them leave, the reality, right? So most of the best programmers in Sumaya, when I was going there, they're all in the US now. They all have Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon. So the question is like, not all of them, like there's some of them are some of them stayed in Jordan, some really good ones also stayed in Jordan, but a few, right? So, so that's the biggest question. So I don't know what the answer to this. As a country, as society, we need to figure out how to prevent smart people from leaving. So that's a big problem.
If Replit was here, maybe they would have stayed to work in Replit.
Yeah, I think maybe if there was more companies that were doing interesting things and paying them well, they wouldn't leave. I would agree.
Yeah.
What was the main monetization strategy for Replit? How do you enforce your engagement or retention? So monetization, we ran through a few things. The first thing, we were selling an API. It got the company to the point where we're not burning a lot of money, but it wasn't really a money-making thing. We deprecated that. We started selling Classroom. It got the company almost profitable at some point before we got into YC. We're now like not focusing on monetizing that. There's still some revenue coming in, but I see it as different stages. So you have a vision and a mission, and you're going towards that. And I see making money as a way to get to that vision and mission. We haven't figured it out yet. Now, most of our money is coming from the hacker plan. So prosumer, so people getting out their credit card and paying for the IDE. And that's currently our main way of making money, and that's growing, has decent, solid growth. I think eventually we'll be in the business of selling sort of cloud compute, cloud services. That seems eventually the case. But until we get there, there might be a lot more other things that we can do. So we're still in this sort of experimentation, figuring out a way. But it's important to always be making money. I think it's bad to have a culture where you're just burning money all the time. And it's okay if the first monetization is not your last monetization. You can always change that. How do you encourage building a consistent brand experience and deliver quality to users and establishing a smooth company-wide process? I think one thing we do differently at Replit is that every engineer can be a product owner. So when we have a project, most of the time it has a single leader that I hold accountable for that project. So they build a design document and they're the owner. We give them feedback. Other people will be working for them or with them, but they will be the product owner. So they're responsible for not only building the thing, but also getting feedback for it, iterating on it and making it better. And it's my father, Fauzi. Happy birthday, Baba. His birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday. Is there a way we can support students and engineers and entrepreneurs here in Jordan? Happy to do that. I was talking to people in PSUT. We gave them free plans recently. I'm not entirely sure if they're using Replit, but we've had discussions before with with His Majesty's office, but it didn't really go anywhere. I'm open to ideas. If anyone has connections or things like that, I'm open to figuring out how do we get Replit into every Jordanian student's hands so they can learn how to code, they can build applications, and they can accelerate their learning career. From Muad, what is your best source that you can get news about in tech? Hacker News. What are your criteria helped to define features limitation between different pricing tiers? That's a bit hard. I would encourage doing more experimentation. One way to think about it is you have the community and you have the user priority and you have the community priority. So when you want to put something under the paid plan, you put the things that are more individual. So right now at Replit, private projects are under the paid plan, and because they don't contribute to the community, private projects most of the time, So we price them under the private. So that's, you know, very well-known tactic to do privacy, but same things like increased performance, we put it under that. Anything that doesn't make the community grow, we generally put it under the paid plan. But anything that creates more growth, we usually make it free. So from experience with Replit, what's the advice teaching kids under 11 to programming? I think getting getting to something fun is important. So I just made a programming language on Replit. I didn't invent it. I just did Basic. A lot of people are familiar with Visual Basic. The reason Basic is interesting is because you can get something on the screen very quickly. So with the new Basic I made, there's one command to draw something on the screen, to draw a pixel on the screen. And so it's very easy for kids. Paul Graham is actually teaching his kids using that language. It's very easy for kids to lose interest and not be really excited about something. So you got to get them excited really quickly. And the way to do that is usually graphics programming, but even text programming, but doing something fun in the first 5 to 10 minutes. And that shows them how fun the journey is. What advice would you give to Jordanian startups or products trying to go global? Just do it from the start. Like always have always think globally. Like never think locally. There's no reason now everything's online to really think locally. You might want to test ideas locally, but you always want to build for the larger market. I have a concept of a product. I'm still working as an employee and don't have time. What is the perfect time, do you think, to start or leave my job? Start on the side. You don't have to leave your job. So, you know, say you work 40 hours a week. I think you can fit in 20 hours a week working on your side project. So every day you can put in 2 hours. Every day of the week you can put in 2 hours. So that's 10 hours. And then the weekend you can put 5 hours one day and 5 hours another day. That's 20 hours. It's easy to do that. You still have plenty of time for family, still have plenty of time to sleep and to exercise and do all of that. 20 hours a week will get you a long time a long way in terms of, say, a year or two working on a side project. And then when the opportunity is clear and the risk is not that big, then quit your job. You don't have to quit your job until the opportunity is clear.
Perfect. That wraps it up. Thank you, Amjad, and thank you for taking the extra time to go through all the questions.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Thank you. This has been great. We would love to meet in person when you're in Jordan. And
would love to have you in our next Expand conference as well. Maybe we'll talk about it later, but let's see what happens with Corona first. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. My pleasure. This is really fun. Thank you.
Happy to hear that. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.